I am Matt Bonner on MMA UK. I am 14-8-1, and I'm the former Cage Warriors Middleweight champion.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's really appreciated. You taking the time out of your training. 1st of July, big date in the calendar, taking on Darren Stewart at Cage Warriors 156. How much are you looking forward to it?
It feels like a big fight, this one. I've had big fights before, world title fights and whatnot, but this one does feel like a big one. This one feels like it's one people are excited about. I think it's going to be a really entertaining fight, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
And looking at Stewart as an opponent, ex-UFC, Ultimate Fighter finalist, been in Cage Warriors or made his Cage Warriors debut, I should say, back in 2014. How do you see him as an opponent coming into this fight?
He's been around the game a long time. He's fought at a very high level. He's certainly not going to be intimidated by me. He's fought in UFC for many, many times, for many years. So, we're all kind of, or certainly myself, I'm looking for that UFC vet on the CV. I'm looking for that win. That's what we all want. That's what tends to open eyes, in the bigger organisations. So it's a big fight. Feels like a big fight, and I'm looking forward to beating him.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you've had any interactions with Darren outside the ring, but what are your opinions of him? And has anything been said in the lead up to this fight?
I've met him very briefly, and this was probably about 3 years ago. There's a few of us at Next Gen who went down and did a little bit of sparring. I didn't spar Darren. I sparred his teammate Mike Shipman at the time. He was a monster of a middleweight, massive middleweight.
Yeah.
I think Darren must have been in the UFC at the time still. I had a little bit of a grapple with him, but nothing really that I can remember of substance. And it was a long time ago. I'm sure he's much better, and I know I'm much better. So,
Yeah.
but in terms of leading up to fight, there's been no dialogue.
No.
You kind of look on the Instagram, here and there, and see what he's doing, what he's getting up to. But apart from that, there's nothing there. There's been no interaction between the two of us.
Yeah, and he won last time out against Leon Aliu via decision. I don't know if you watched that fight live, if you've watched it since. How did you rate his performance in that fight?
Very interesting performance. He has, you think of Darren Stewart, you think of a banger, you think of someone with big power,
Yeah.
someone who's technically aggressive. But in that fight, he was very much the wrestler, and that's kind of the interesting thing for me going into this fight. Was Darren Stewart a wrestler because he was fighting Leon Aliu, who had loads of power as well, who knocked out James Webb previously? Or is that the direction that he's going in with his training now? Is he being maybe being a little bit more strategic with his wrestling? And who knows? That's the interesting thing. Is he going to come in and wrestle me, or is he going to come in for a bit of a scrap instead? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and you're both coming into the fight on two fight win streaks, although yours are obviously a bit different to his. You've had two, early finishes. He's had two decision wins. You've said just to me previously that you don't think he'll be scared of you coming into this fight, but do you think the nature of your victories in recent times, you haven't every single win you've had has come via finish since, I think it was 2020 when you beat Matt Inman. So do you think that maybe adds something to his mindset coming into the fight?
Possibly. When I say I don't think he's scared of me, I don't think he'll be intimidated. He's fought, big fights, lots of money in front of lots of people, and I don't think I want to intimidate me in that way. Sometimes I've walked into fights, or even before fights, when you see the guy at the weigh-in or the guy in the reception at the hotel, the day before or the day of, and you already know sometimes that you've won the fight based off their body language. And that's not going to be the case with Darren. He's going to be game for this. He's going to be determined. Is he going to be too bothered that I'm going to have TKO'd plenty of guys and finished them? On a whim, I'd say probably not. I think if anything, Darren's going to underestimate me. I think he's going to think this is going to be quite a comfortable win for himself. I might be dead wrong. He might maybe respect me a little bit more than I think, but that's kind of what I'm going off with his attitude and his personality. I think he's going to go in there thinking that he's going to be a level above me.
Yeah, and I know you wouldn't want to assume or overlook anything, but how big a win or how big would it be if you were to win at your upcoming fight, and what would you want after if it was to happen?
That's interesting. For me, it would be big. For me, beating Darren Stewart, finishing someone like Darren Stewart especially would be massive. And that's what these, if you think of the UFC, that's what they, on the top of their list is guys who finish fights. And I've already had quite a lot of finishes, but maybe not the finishes of someone who's a UFC veteran, like we've mentioned before. In terms of after the fight, it's a tricky one. I'm not sure. Obviously, you've got that middleweight title fight kind of lingering with
Yeah,
Stanton and James Webb, and I've already beat both of those before, so that kind of would be the natural path, I suppose. I think that's what most people would expect, but I expected to fight Stanton for the belt, and it went to James Webb. So
yeah,
I'm not too sure myself. I think I've took this approach in my last few fights of I'm just going to focus on this next fight, don't think past it, and just really focus all my energies on winning this scrap with Darren.
yeah, definitely. And I was lucky enough to be in the crowd at Cage Warriors 151 Unplugged. Unfortunately, I was at the second show, so I didn't watch you. I had to watch you on the TV. But it was a great performance. First round knockout of Cadena. How did you rate your performance personally in that fight?
I was pleased. That's cool, and I knew he'd pull guard. I absolutely knew it. There's obviously a little bit of tension at the weigh-in and whatnot with pushing and shoving and stuff, and I just thought you're getting it. You're getting it now tomorrow. So I was pleased to TKO him. That's if it fights are hard to predict, but if I was going to predict how that fight would have gone, it would have gone like that. The only kind of I guess thing I was surprised about was how easy he was in guard. I figured that he'd feel a little bit more dangerous. He's got a good arm bar. He's throwing his legs up for triangles and whatnot. And the idea was if he was going to pull guard was for us to stand back out of guard and get it back to the feet. But I felt so comfortable there that it was. And I saw the finish and went for it, and that was that. It was one of my more comfortable wins I think of my career.
Yeah, definitely. And your last loss came to Ivan Elliott later last year, but obviously that was a welterweight, that wasn't a middleweight. So your last middleweight loss hasn't actually came, since I think it was back in 2021, in your first title
Yeah.
defense. Yeah. So how do you think you've improved as a fighter since that last middleweight loss?
My grappling is much better
Yeah.
than it was against Milan. That's something that we've heavily focused on in next gen. Not for me, but in terms of for the fighters in the room, in terms of scrambling up from takedowns. That whole fight was based around a back take. Essentially, he'd take me back, and I'd get to mount, and then he'd take me back, and then go back to mount. That he would not have that control over me if it happened again. Much better at defending the back take, much better takedown defense, and yeah, I really. It's interesting. Milan's kind of disappeared since then, but it'd be very interesting to run that fight back and see how it would go the second time.
Yeah, definitely. And talking of that loss, obviously the fight before that, we had the incredible fourth round rear naked choke over Nathias Frederick to win the championship. Can you describe your emotions that night and what it felt like to win the belt?
It was a kind of. I think people are surprised when I say this. I was always one of those people who wish I could kind of cry and get down on my hands and knees and say, "Oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever done" and whatnot. And it was a relief. It was a relief. It was. There's not many people in this sport who get to take things out of it. I think this sport generally takes more than it ends up giving back. You get injured, you lose fights. There's a lot of dismay in MMA. In any kind of professional athlete, I guess would be the same. But if I had to retire tomorrow, there's still something I think that I've taken from the sport. I've been a former world champion. That
Yeah.
was my goal, was to be a Cage Warriors champion. There were certainly times when I didn't think I was ever going to get there. I lost my first two pro fights,
Mm.
and there were losses after that. I've lost quite a few times, and there were a lot of setbacks. So it was more of a relief. It kind of felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. And yeah, that was it. At the end, there wasn't this massive, oh my God, I'm the boy, and I'm going to go to the UFC and this, and this. It was more of, thank God, I've managed to steal something out of the sport.
Yeah. And on your in a different line of conversation on your socials, I saw you had, is it a baby boy last month?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So congratulations there, mate.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations to your partner as well. How has a child affected training routines at all? Has it changed your mindset going into fights? Are you fighting for a different reason now, or is it all the same as it was before?
I think when people fighters have said in the past, I'm doing this for my kids and whatnot, you think, God, that sounds silly. That sounds a bit daft. But now I've had a kid, I think it's not that I'm fighting, for Arthur. There's something with my son's called Arthur. It's not that I'm fighting for him, but I would never want him to. There is going to be a day where he's going to sit down and watch the fights with me at some point, and I never want him to kind of see me in the cage being a coward or not going for it, not pulling the trigger and let the fight slip away. So that is kind of my mindset going in there is like, don't embarrass your kid. Go in there and leave it on the line and fight for your life. And and show them that you can be brave. And there's no shame in losing fights, but don't lose it, because you didn't pull the trigger, or you were as a coward, or something like that. So it's kind of, it has made me a little bit more game in a way. I think some people, it does the opposite. It makes them a little bit soft. I've
Yeah.
heard coaches say this in the past, that having kids takes away the killer instinct. Where I think it's almost been the opposite for me. And I think it was the same with my twin brother as well. My twin brother's a Thai boxer, very high level Thai boxer. And ever since he's had his kid, it seems to have made the same effect. You want to go out there and you want to bring the shiny belts home to your kids, and show them that if they train hard and they put the mind to it, they can achieve things as well.
Yeah, you're given a similar answer. We spoke the other day to Shaj Hack, who's recently had a
Yeah.
child as well, and he said a similar thing about what you're fighting for and a change in mindset and stuff like that. I was wondering, I know it's really early days, but will your son be will you push him to get into the next generation? Will you push him to get to the gym, or is that too early days?
He'll certainly learn fighting to defend himself. That's something that I think is super important.
Yeah.
As a parent, you teach your kids how to swim in case they fall in, a canal or a pond or whatever, and you teach your kids how to defend themselves, because damn well they're going to have to use those skills at some point in their life, whether it's at school or in a nightclub somewhere, whatever. But he certainly won't be a fighter if he doesn't want to. I'd be quite happy as long as he's passionate about something, and he puts his heart and soul into something. It could be playing the guitar or dancing or MMA. It could be whatever he wants to do. There's got to be no pressure, but he will learn how to defend himself, because I think that's a necessary skill.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And we've had a lot of the lads from Next Generation on the show before. You've all been so nice, all so complimentary. Obviously, you're the next in line. From the outside, it looks like the gym is it's building its reputation day by day on an international basis because of the fighters you've got coming out of it at the minute. How crucial and important has the coaching and the training been for you and your personal development at Next Gen?
It's been massive, and I'll never stop saying that moving to Next Gen was the best decision I made career wise. There was kind of a point when I went from amateur to professional where I was essentially kind of dipping to different gyms and kind of coaching myself to some extent, which sounds crazy looking back, very naive. But I lost 2 fights in a row, and I thought, I need to do something. I need to make a change, and I need a professional coach. I was working with coaches who, had normal day jobs, who were coaching in the evenings because they enjoyed doing it, not because they were professional coaches. And I think that's the difference with Next Gen. You've got 3 guys there: Adam Venture, Ellis Hampson, and Paul Rimmer, who are professional coaches who live and breathe the sport. If they go to the UFC, they've been to Cage Warriors, they've been to Bellator. They've cornered at Octagon, they've cornered at all these big shows, and there's a wealth of experience there. So I think that was the difference. And I'll never regret going Next Gen. Whatever happens, in the future, whether I retire or whatever goes on, it was always the decision, always the right decision. Always for me. I'll always fight on Next Gen. I would never go to a different gym.
Great, that's great to hear. And how would you rank the Northwest MMA scene against the rest of the UK?
I think it's great. It's up there, isn't it? I know we've got Lean Edwards down in Birmingham, and Fabian Edwards, who are doing really well. There's some good guys down at GB Top Team in London and stuff with Brad Pickett. But Next Gen are definitely up there. We obviously got Paddy and Molly, and we've had Chris Fishgold, who went to the UFC before that. We've got all these upcoming guys who are kind of on the rise in Cage Warriors. Someone like Nate Fletcher, Adam Cullen, Luke Riley. Some guys who you've never heard of before, but obviously I know from training them every day are going to be killers in a very short amount of time. So Next Gen are well up there. For me, the premier gym in Liverpool in the Northwest, and like you say, give it maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and there'll be at least another 3 or 4 guys in the UFC, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And extending that question one further, how would you rate the UK scene as a whole at the minute? Because obviously we are starting to now compete with the likes of America. How would you compare it to other countries and places?
I think again, talking back to Lean Edwards, we can see now that you can be UK born and bred and still train in the UK and still be UFC champion. This idea of you have to go to America to be able to compete and whatnot. The wrestling is much better. The jiu-jitsu here is fantastic. Next Gen, for instance, obviously because I've been there, we managed to put that whole MMA game in. It's not just 3 or 4 separate sports jammed together anymore. MMA is its own sport. So you don't need to be a world class wrestler. You need to be a world class MMA fighter. You need to be able to put all those basics together. So I do see in the future again more UK guys who are from the UK, train in the UK, who are going to become world champions for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And for yourself, do you have any near future goals you want to achieve, say in the next, let's say next year? Have you got any near future goals?
I've got 2 fights left on this current Cage Warriors contract. Darren being, I've got one after Darren. So there's decisions to be made, and I've messaged my manager Graham himself and said, "No, I've changed now. I've had a kid. I'm not just fighting because I love doing it, and the most fighters would pay to do it. To be honest, if Cage Warriors offered me £100, 3 years ago, I'd have said, "Hey, it's £100 to do something I enjoy doing. Well, let's go." But
Yeah,
now I'm fighting because I want to, provide for my family, provide for my child. So again, without giving kind of too much away, it is a case of getting these 2 fights over with and seeing what Cage Warriors offer. I love fighting for Cage Warriors. It'd be so easy to stay at Cage Warriors.
yeah,
The staff are amazing. You're fighting 3-4 times a year, so you're active and you've got something to build towards. But there's other things now at play, and there's things that I need to do. I need to provide for my family. I need to be able to, make a living out of this.
yeah. And finally, mate, I don't want to take too much of your time today. How would you like to be remembered?
I think the main thing to be remembered is maybe bouncing back from losses.
Yeah,
I think that this game in itself it's becoming a little bit more like boxing. I think that's a shame in terms of the undefeated record is the absolute everything. Oh my God, he's 10-0, but then you dip into his record and he's fought 10 divs. Where I've lost my first 2 pro fights and I managed to bounce back and I lost the title and hopefully I'm going to manage to bounce back from that. And I think I have had maybe 1 or 2 people come up to me in the past and say, "You know what, I lost my debut or I've been knocked out, but if you can do it, it kind of gives me a little belief that I can bounce back as well." And that was almost worth losing just to hear a couple of people say that. So
yeah.
I think that kind of that sticks with me. Bouncing back and losing well, if that makes sense. You're a loser if you quit when you lose. You're not a loser if you lose fights. If you can bounce back, I think that's probably one of the more braver things you can do.